morning, everyone. This is Dan Murphy. Next to me is Lou Somogyi from Blue and Gold Illustrated. We just finished watching the first 30 minutes of Notre Dame's spring practice here on a chilly March morning in South Bend. They were inside of the Loftus Arena, but we got to see 30 minutes of the team kind of getting loose, go through some of their personnel things. And I was watching the defensive side. Lou was on offense. Lou, what are some of the things that stood out to you about the first practice?
Well, the first thing I was going to be curious about was the alignment of the offensive line, and this is going to be very fluid. So, I mean, I don't think we need to just come to conclusions, but I think we expected Ronnie Stanley, maybe the best athlete there on the line, to be at left tackle where Zach Martin was. Steve Elmer, who started at left guard, is going to line up next to him right now on the left side. They want to replace that Martin Watt, you know, those two mainstays that have been there the last 3 years, with another powerful left side there. And I think those are your two best linemen. Put them next to each other there. Matt Haggerty was working as the center in place of Nick Martin, who was on the bike recovering from the MCL injury. And Christian Lombard is indeed at right guard where he started last year, even though he started 13 games at right tackle the previous season in 2012. And the big surprise, Mike McGlinchey, the sophomore, you know, one of the best athletes. I mean, Brian Kelly has talked about him maybe even lining up some at tight end if he could do it if necessary. But he's been listed as the right tackle. And then behind him was also Colin McGovern, another freshman currently there. We had kind of pegged him as an inside guy, but to help with the tackles there, because the two backup tackles were Hunter Biven on the left side and Colin McGovern on the right, and then Mark Harrell was at center, and then Connor Hanratty was the left guard, and then at the right guard was John Mantelis. So it's a very heavy freshman line there, that the five-man group there going in there, but that's been the main thing that stood out.
I think defensively, too, the positions people were really kind of worried or thinking about going into spring with safety and the inside linebackers. And starting safeties were Max Redfield and Austin Collinsworth. I think Collinsworth was somebody people thought might fall behind to that second team, especially with Elijah Shoemate jumping ahead, but he was out there with the first group. And then the first-string linebackers today were Kendall Moore and Joe Schmidt, which they're very short on bodies. I assume those guys are going to rotate in and out. It's only the first look on the first day, but those are the guys that got the first call. Ishaq Williams was down on the defensive line with the first group, which is kind of interesting. He still listed as a linebacker, still going to be a cat linebacker, but he was out there in a defensive end position in the 3-4 when they first took the field.
I think you're going to see a lot of Ishaq with his hand on the ground. He came in at 271. I remember him saying last spring he doesn't want to be above 260.
Right.
So sometimes things change.
He looks like a defensive lineman. And he, Romeo Okwara, and Anthony Rabasa, who are those first three cat linebackers, that kind of hybrid player, all worked with the defensive line when they broke up into different positions for those drills. So that's something I think they're going to work more and more on that way as you see them kind of change that position even more into a hybrid, getting their hand on the ground quite a bit and running that 4-3 a lot. If you can read much into the first 30 minutes of the first day of spring, that's one thing that kind of jumped out. I think another guy that people are probably interested in hearing about, of course, is the quarterback Everett Golson. Did you watch them throwing a little bit today?
Yeah, I mean, he was flinging it. He seemed eager out there. You could see he worked with the quarterbacks coach there over the previous 3 months or so with George Whitfield there. So he was flinging it. And you know what's going to be the most worthless question? Who's starting at wide receiver? Because you want to talk about a committee there. Now the first group that came out, Corey Robinson was on the boundary side, C.J. Procise was in the slot, and then Chris Brown was on the wide side, the X side there. But Amir Carlisle was working exclusively with the slot receivers there. I like the idea of him being used in the capacity that T.J. Jones was last year, as far as with the jet sweep. You know, T.J. carried 4 times for 16 yards and a touchdown in the bowl game alone. So if you can get the hands on Amir Carlisle, you know, 3 or 4 times with the jet sweep, maybe a pass or two, 2 or 3 returns, kickoff. You don't want too many kickoff returns because that means the defense is giving up a lot of time. He can conceivably get the ball in his hands 8-10 times a game.
Well, that's going to do it for us for our first initial reaction from the first practice. Stay tuned to blueandgold.com. We'll have plenty more coming today and throughout the next month, and we'll keep you coming with updates.